woman whose prophecies we'll be discussing today is among the top 10 most powerful psychics in the world. She foresaw the future not only on Earth, but also in outer space, predicting the launch of the first satellites, fatal events on the Apollo spacecraft, and the moon's conquest by Soviet space vehicles. Jeanne Dixon predicted Kennedy's death and Marilyn Monroe's early departure from life, with most of her prophecies well documented. For instance, her prediction was published in the May 13, 1956, issue of Parade magazine, stating that the 1960 presidential election would be won by a Democrat who would later be assassinated or die in office as the President of the United States. The 1960 United States presidential election was the 44th quadrennial presidential election, held on Tuesday, November 8th. In a tense election, Democratic Senator John F. Kennedy defeated incumbent Vice President Richard Nixon, the Republican candidate. Overall, political forecasts and predictions of catastrophes were the main subjects of Dixon's prophecies throughout her life. Today, let's talk about the future she predicted for Russia, Ukraine, and the West. But first, here are a few more facts about her past, as she began seeing the future in childhood, and she prophesied about becoming famous thanks to her gift. Soon enough, her prophecy came true, and Jeanne's words circled the globe. Judge for yourself. On November 8, 1944, President Roosevelt summoned her to the White House and asked, "How much time do I have left to finish the work entrusted to me?" Jeanne sincerely replied, 6 months, if not less. Her grim prediction soon came true because on April 12, 1945, Roosevelt died in Georgia from a cerebral hemorrhage. In the same year, the psychic predicted to Winston Churchill that he had little time left as Prime Minister, although he might return to power later. "England will never let me down," Churchill sharply replied. Nevertheless, Jeanne was right, as the British electorate concluded his mission in that position. In 1942, Dixon tried to dissuade actress Carole Lombard from a planned trip. Carole, the wife of the brilliant Clark Gable, decided to go to Indianapolis on a promotional trip for war bonds. Jeanne Dixon told her to abstain from air travel for the next 6 weeks because it posed a direct threat to her life. But, of course, Carole did not listen and did not believe the words of astrologers and psychics. She made it to Indianapolis, but on the way back to Los Angeles, the plane made a layover in Las Vegas. The airport administration asked her to give up her seat to an officer who was behind schedule, but the actress refused. 23 minutes after takeoff, the plane encountered a severe storm and crashed in the Nevada mountains. The actress was only 33 years old. If we recall the mathematical calculations of probability, the chance of such a prediction coming true was infinitesimally small. However, events speak for themselves. In 1946, Jeanne predicted the division of India down to the day. An Indian diplomat in Washington laughed at the forecast, considering such a development impossible. On the morning of February 20th, 1947, he even called Dixon, reminding her of her unfulfilled prophecy. However, Jeanne remained unperturbed, calmly responding that the day had not yet ended. And the next day, newspapers reported that India was dividing. In 1949, Dixon informed Ivy Baker Priest, a former U.S. Treasurer, that Richard Nixon would someday become president and reiterated the prediction in 1953. In December 1966, Jeanne told the wife of the head of the operational division of the U.S. Space Agency, Gene Stout, the following phrase: "I see a nightmarish fiery catastrophe that will lead to the death of astronauts. I feel their souls leaving the capsule in clouds of smoke." On January 27, 1967, the most powerful fire occurred, engulfing American astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee during the Apollo tests at Cape Kennedy. Despite all this, many Americans laughed at Jeanne Dixon, who looked far from being a psychic or clairvoyant and seemed more like an ordinary housewife. Jeanne's prophecies about the successes of the Soviet Union in space exploration were particularly unpopular back home. Naturally, her words were often met with skepticism. Departing this world in 1997, she could not, without a special gift, predict in advance what she shared in her interviews. Let's talk about the future that Jeanne Dixon predicted for America, Russia, and Ukraine. What will be the outcome of the global confrontation we are witnessing today? Jeanne Dixon even talked about the future of the world with Roosevelt himself. She received official invitations to meetings multiple times. What Jeanne said about America's future was unacceptable to many, but Roosevelt, suffering from an incurable illness at the time, trusted Jeanne. He understood that she was simply recounting her visions and feelings, not making things up on the spot. Roosevelt was deeply concerned about the fate of the United States. At that time, America was involved in 2 full-scale wars, in the Pacific and in Europe. It was time to think about post-war order and the reconstruction of war-torn countries. Jeanne told the president that the United States would face a bad end in its historical future. The causes would be wars, their preparations, and the pitting of other states against each other. All of this would bring neither happiness nor joy to the American people. On the contrary, in the near historical future, people would face a crisis, the most severe in centuries. According to Jeanne Dixon's visions, the 21st century would be the last for the America that was once considered great and the one the whole world looked up to. The old states would no longer exist. Events might lead to the complete dissolution of the United States, and if it didn't happen for foreign policy reasons, other forces of catastrophic proportions would come into play, the strength of which is difficult to assess in advance. Jeanne knew that America would not last, and it saddened her. At the same time, she spoke about how a political split might occur even before natural events take effect. Initially, the first state would voluntarily secede from the United States. Then it would go down the chain, Jeanne said. Extreme poverty and high crime rates would force people to form communities independent of authority. These communities would resemble those where the indigenous people of North America lived, whom colonizers ruthlessly annihilated in the past. Now, the first quarter of the 21st century is coming to an end. She asserted that wars, their preparations, and conflicts between other states will not pass without consequences for her homeland. At that time, Roosevelt was very concerned about what would happen to Russia, as he saw it as a direct adversary. He asked the question, what to do with a massive country ruled by an Eastern tyrant? Dixon replied that, unfortunately, Russia would not be America's ally after the war, and the mentalities of the Russian and American people were very different. There was something special about them that would never bind these 2 countries with friendly ties in the future. However, perhaps diplomatic peace could be achieved on mutually beneficial terms. But the catch was that this needed to be pursued even before the arrival of the 21st century, as time was working against the states. Jeanne voiced predictions about Russia with caution, as it was not liked by the West and Europe even then. Firstly, she advised Roosevelt not to concede anything to Stalin that could be avoided, as this circumstance could have a historical impact on America's future. Under the pressure of Germany, fighting with all their might, the great nations together defeated the evil, the echoes of which we still encounter today. As it turned out, the descendants of the ideology of evil, with which the whole world once fought, remained silent for a long time before manifesting themselves again. And today, another battle between good and evil is in full swing. Dixon claimed that there would come a time when Russia and India would join forces to create a powerful alliance, unparalleled by any. By that time, the United States would be experiencing a profound crisis that would also affect Europe. There would be a reason why 1/3 of Europe would become cold and uninhabitable. In the long term, these lands would be unable to yield crops. Europe would face the need for assistance on all fronts, which the states would be unable to provide, as they would be dealing with a powerful crisis. If Europe manages to overcome this crisis in the future, the fate of the United States is unknown. The lands of America, for the reasons already mentioned, would become scattered and bear new names. In addition to the prophecy about Russia and brotherly nations, the Battle of Brothers signifies the battle of Slavic peoples living in agony for the last decades, or perhaps the count has already begun in years. This is what Jeanne predicted for the future of Slavic peoples. The future Russia in alliance with a truly democratic and spiritual India would be an invincible unity, friendly to the third giant of the planet, which is considered China. It is quite obvious that today the groundwork is being laid for everything said, and Dixon's predictions are coming true exactly. Also, if the prophetess was correct, modern Ukraine will again become part of Russia, but it is not excluded that the historical part of its lands, which once belonged to the Poles, will return to them, as the prediction concerned only genuinely Russian lands. Write in the comments what you think about this and whether it is possible. Jeanne Dixon's other interesting words about Russia sounded like this: Russia will show the world a new way of allied governance. It will be a new life philosophy, unrelated to communism. The world has never seen such a political organization. It will be something new. Dixon also had predictions about the Antichrist. The Antichrist, Jeanne said, would be born on February 5, 1962, in the East. The United States would support him, despite the fact that this person would spread false teachings. Perhaps, in a spiritual sense, this would be the impetus for further events related to America. Moreover, America in recent times would be at war with China, the prophetess claimed. And at first, she would even succeed. In the end, if China uses the support of friendly countries, America will remain defeated, but the West will think for a while that it won this battle. By 2037, China would have conflicting relations with Russia, and there would be two further paths for the union of superpowers into a powerful friendly alliance or the continuation of war, in which China may decide that it will achieve world dominance only by multiplying its lands at the expense of Russia. But the point is that if the war between Russia and China had ended, it is unlikely that in Jeanne's vision there would be a flourishing and vast country, as well as a renewed China claiming the title of a superpower of the new era. Most likely, these will be friendly countries with the most powerful potential for growth and development. Dixon also predicted an increase in cataclysms and a serious global anomaly that would affect the whole world, especially Europe. What it will be remains to be understood. And if you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel to be the first to watch videos about the future. Write in the comments what you think about Jeanne Dixon's prediction, or if you have your own version of events. Thank you for watching. Until next time.